So, Melanie, we are live and we are recording. So, so on record, thank you, Melanie, for being part of this symposium and the other events. It's always been nice listening to you. And
Thank
of
you.
course, today also, I'm sure you'll bring in some very interesting insights and perspectives. So please,
Well,
Melanie,
thank
but of
you.
course, yes, you'll have to tell us about yourself and then we'll move from there, please.
Okay. Well, Vikram, it's not the first time we've met, and I'm grateful that you're having me here today. I think we're talking about mediation and neutrality. Is it even possible? And I'm going to bring up some different perspectives and bring up a lot of different other professionals and how they deal with neutrality possibly, and what we can learn from that, and how can we affirm or not confirm that we're able to obtain neutrality, right? I think that's what this whole symposium conversation is about. Is it possible? So I did have the pleasure of speaking with Vikram when we were doing colonization and decolonization. And it was interesting because one of the thoughts that I didn't even really bring up in that conversation was neutrality acts. In the United States, we have, let's see, between 1935 and 1937, Congress passed 3 neutrality acts. I should have brought that up. But as this relates to the United States getting out of war, it being illegal for Americans to sell and transport arms, other war materials, yada, 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 this went down. But we're talking about a different type of neutrality today. We're talking about neutrality. Could it be attached to a duty as a mediator to ensure that our disputing parties are encouraged to consider that being neutral is a respect and a process that we can use to help them be more aware? So this hopefully would enable communication issues and problems that they might be having, hopefully free from hindrances. That's what our goals usually are. So if we're mutually satisfactorily doing dispute resolution, we feel like oftentimes it's embracing a balance to a goal of fairness. So we've got the plaintiff defendant, and we're trying to be this balance, and then hopefully bring in conversations. Well, what does that look like as we consider conflict? I was thinking about this. You were talking about how we are dependent on technology now. Well, news has been televised for years. It's been on news for a long time, right? So if a conflict is televised or written, verbal, or spoken, neutrality, do we see that in the news? Is a bystander, are we hearing it and we're not forming a bias? We probably are, but there's professional hats that need to be worn when we are thinking about how the public views social media, the news, how its neutrality can be seen, and how does the public respond to it? I'll bring up a couple of things here. So the public might view it in an outpost of, on a social media, they disagreement with how a voting process went through, or publics might protest standing in violent protest. They might protest in a quiet protest. They might also see the news broadcasters with the unbiased face as they present the news to us, and it almost doesn't really show emotions as that comes out. But then you pull on an emotional topic, a birth of a child or something sweet and special, then they can kind of show a little bit more emotion. Well, we're dealing with people that's what they know. That's what they understand, how news is perceived, received, understood, delivered, however you want to talk about it. So are we as now mediators considering, how does this work in the justice process, right? Restorative relationships is a concept we talked about back when I talked about emotional intellect in the last conversation we had. And I also was supposed to speak in the philosophy session, and I didn't get to present. So I will bring up some of that as we continue to move forward. I'll bring up some of the concepts, but at any time you want to interrupt me, please do. Don't mind.
Like right now, I'm going to interrupt you because I'm going to do a little basic on what we're talking about with this just the symposium, and a bit about, of course, where to find information. And then you're going to tell us about yourself, which you haven't. And then we get into the topic. So this is what we're doing: Neutrality and Mediation International Symposium, 12th to 16th. 12th December is International Day of Neutrality, and of course Melanie is doing this presentation and coming from what Desmond Tutu wrote, because I have to repeat this, Melanie, only because every session is watched by different people. I would think that everyone can't watch everything. I understand their limitation. There's a little too much which goes out. So for that reason, so this was kind of the background. Of course, with Bernie Mayer, I had that discussion on the neutrality trap. So we've discussed neutrality there, but this statement is now, I mean, it goes around a lot. So let's just go through it. If you're neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. So basically, this being a kind of a background to this. So that's one thing. And then, of course, sessions have been, obviously, all of the sessions have been nice. Little bit on the fact that people can go to mediatorvikram.com and get basic information of what's happening. There are lots of more than 450 videos. So YouTube, I don't know whether you'll be able to see exactly what all is there. So some idea you can get here of shows and events and other. I mean, I have some categories there. I put out the YouTube channel and all. World Mediation Circle being the focus area now, creating these mediation circles in every community and every organization and schools and everything. That support part, shows and events part. And of course, like I said, there's a lot of other, I mean, things like the Ken section and the YouTube channel section. So that's all that. So Melanie, I won't take any more of your time. Now it's about you first. You have to tell us about yourself, so we know where you're coming from.
I function out of the United States, and I'm a mediator. I don't usually give out all the locations just because of the different types of mediations I do in private consulting. So we'll just leave it at that, the United States. We are joining together to talk about neutrality and is it obtainable. I did listen to Bernie. I've listened to a few others, and I might bring up some of these conversations again in our notes here as we continue this conversation today.
Would you want to say hi to Eileen and Mandy first? Of course, Mandy you just met, and Eileen has joined us, and you can just say hi to them. That's all that they are allowed to say. And beyond
that, flip it where I can see them. I can't see them right now, so they'll have to speak up to be able to speak to them.
Okay. So Mandy you just met. She's in Greece. Eileen is in Florida. Her background is not exactly what she's got behind her. I assume that. So Eileen, do you want to say hi to us?
Sure. Good morning or good afternoon to Vikram, since we're tuning in globally. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. Yeah, I'm a PhD student studying conflict resolution, and so also a lot of experience and more conflict coaching. And yeah, I'm excited to be here and listen and share any insights. Thank you for the invite.
Because we were supposed to meet after your session, and I told her, why don't you come in? Melanie is a wonderful person. It's be nice for you to interact with her also. So that's what it is. Mandy is, of course, because you've seen me putting up her island. So Eileen, my Mandy is in a beautiful island called Zakynthos in Greece. So that's her introduction not required. It seems that everyone knows her. That's what I've suddenly figured out. Melanie says, "Oh, I've seen that island."
Wonderful.
So Melanie, now it's you and the topic, but you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself. Totally your wish, whatever you want to. It's your show now. We are sitting and listening to you. They're on mute. I'm not on mute, but I'm a mute spectator. Please.
Well, thank you. Let's see. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I'm a grandmother. All right, it's just a beautiful life. I used to do nursing and healthcare practices before I studied law. Mediating for probably the last 10, 12 years-ish, heavily in the courts until COVID hit. And then it just changed our whole process, really. And I've had to kind of look back and get time to sit back and help do more consulting. So I do a lot of private consulting and helping businesses become more aware of some of the crises they've got there when they are working with employees. There's always crisis, sure enough, and we want to help them be able to manage a better way. So I do a lot of that. Enjoy it. I do enjoy public speaking. It's easier to do it in person, but when we're on the video and things are glitching or we're got backgrounds like I have, you might see some weird stuff flickering, and it can be a little bit of a distraction, and I apologize in advance for that. So let's go back into our topic. So we've been talking about neutrality as a mediator. Is it attainable? Bernie, his book, we heard a lot from his opening remarks. What does this look like? And Ken's going to end it for us. Interestingly enough, before I get on to further, Ken Cloke at Pepperdine, he and his wife, Joan Goldsmith, were my mentors. I studied under them and enjoyed that process. And I know, Vikram, you don't like to read, but I've read every one of their books. I've just so you know. I've learned a lot. But we can also learn a lot by listening to each other. And in that way, this format works really well. So it's a really nice opportunity. Vikram, I applaud you again for your efforts. Thank you. Because I believe our world is a better place because you're willing to do it. And because we're able to jump in like this and you're inviting us in, we're doing it. So thank you again. I do appreciate you, Mandy and others, everyone that is involved. If you're not involved, then I encourage you to be involved. Those that are listening that are just being the spectator, but you're not wanting to get involved yet, please do. We have something to learn from you. I'm sure of it. All right. So I'm going to go back to conflict. As I was mentioning earlier, you were talking about how our technology is a problem, and sometimes we're now dependent on it more than ever. But as this World Symposium goes, we are proving that it's helpful, but it isn't without its own issues. And in this situation, I want to bring it up because if we think about how news is given out on the world, it's oftentimes through a written form, a video recording that people are taking, or by broadcasters who do it professionally, and they bring us this information. Yet when they bring us this information, they really have to have kind of a business face. They have to share the information without being completely lost in it, that they can relay the information. Even in a war zone, we can see these broadcasters putting themselves in harm's way to bring us information. And that tends to show a lot more of the truths of emotions and ducking from mortal shells or whatever's going on in the background. But those things, the news broadcasters, the anchors, we're talking about relationships here. And neutrality, as we want to hop in back to mediation, I'm going to talk a little bit about neutrality as it may be obtained as a part of a restorative relationship concept. And this concept matters because to mediate or retain an order from a judge for these parties to go into mediation, these parties have to be willing to follow out a judge mandated order. And when this happens, these parties may not be aware of their idea, the concept, what they need to be, what their concept is when they're coming into this conversation. They don't oftentimes know what it means, how to use it, how to understand it. And that's where we come in. We need to bring the process to an understandable, functional part of their, is neutrality achievable? So it's critical if we model behaviors and encourage effective communication. So the justice printed, let's think about it. So lawyers are picked by, how do they pick? Who do they defend? Well, it's mostly available because of evidence base, the evidence is available, witnesses available, and the legal precedents, do they feel like they can win a case? A mediator, judge appointed mediation as a part of justice process. Emotions now become part of it because it's not just facts that are involved. It can now become emotions, and the plaintiff and defendant can be in a dialogue, which you're not allowed to in front of a judge, right? But when you bring this mediation process into it, they start to discover underlying drivers to their conflict. If we're thinking of it in a doctor's office, a doctor's approach is neutrality. It's often seen as scientific. It represents truths of a matter, and the matter being matter of a medical terminology of atom and matter chemistry, scientific concepts. But conflict of interest have to be reported with research, and they have to respond in the presentation. Do you have a conflict of interest? Meaning, are you being paid, or is there something else that is driving you to present for this data, this particular data? Let's think of another way. All right, we'll go back to mediation. I looked up on a website, CIARB, so it's capital CIA, lowercase RB News website. It talks about concerns in neutrality, particularly in a context of self-determination for dispute parties. If it's a regulated practice in all of the United States to be in mediation, like we'll say, for instance, Tennessee's Supreme Court has a thing that you have to say you're a Rule 31 listed mediator. And supposedly this follows for your practice, regulatory practice requirements and how you report it. So, I mean, we do have some governing body of regulations of how mediators are supposed to react and how it's supposed to be dealt with, and how, even if it's not appropriate, how somebody can report if you're not appropriate in your interactions. So we know if that's possible. The whole concept of this symposium right now, if I understand it, Vikram, is considering thoughts of, are we showing bias? Can we truly be neutral? And what conduct helps us to become truly neutral, right? Objectively, don't impede ability to impede fair communications, right? So I'll go on with that. Let's see. I also was thinking about, I wear vision assistants. I wear glasses, but without these, I can't see anything. And if you wear contacts, people can do that. But helping clients look through a conflict in a different lens, figuratively, not just with my lens thing here. But it is similar to that of eyeglasses. Let's think about that for a minute. We have different styles of glasses we might wear. We have different fashion ideas, but the goal would be we want 20/20 vision, or as close to it as we could get as we're wearing these. And because it matters how we function day to day, we don't get ourselves hurt. But if we aren't honest with our ophthalmologist when we're doing this eye exam, we might get really nice eyewear, but not really the right prescription for our eyes. And effectively, it won't help us move about and navigate safely. Let's talk about it as a mediated perspective. Neutrality and a balance. We as mediators decide the best approach. Neutrality is essential to reframing a situation. The conflicting parties might show a willingness to work in true speaking to resolve conflicts if reframed. Now, I know you know where I'm going with the frame idea, but an unbiased party concept, it challenges their need to view conflict in a different way. So taking off these specs and getting the right view in a different lens might help them see something or relatively understand something differently. But when they're in a crisis, they're blinded to that idea of fairness, neutrality. Why aren't they getting what they deserve? But it's a process. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. So neutrality in work as a mediation, Indeed is a very popular hiring app. A lot of companies use this to find employees. And I don't promote them. I don't work for them. I'm just bringing it up as an example. But Indeed defines and quotes professional behavior in a workplace of what requirements that this employer will require for you to be considered. It includes the way you speak, the way you look, the way you act, how to make decisions on their benefit of their representing their company. We, as you know, the principle of that is professional work behavior, including trusting their managers, their colleagues, and clients with respect. So it's a project of a positive attitude. Maybe some other explanation. Do you want to stop? Oh no. Okay. Professional behaviors that we talk about in business is a place to succeed as a team because you're promoting a business. You are, don't undermine the team. You're supporting team members. You show respect for all your members. You remain flexible for work hours and open to change. And you're communicating to represent this company to give the customers a good experience. That is a big sum of, a lot of what being in the business world means. Well, I was looking up some information and I found a website. It's www.ttuhcs. I'll say it again, www.ttuhsc.edu. Importance of professionalism. Well, what's a professional behavior? Well, it helps separate business from the personal business of us, just an individual, how they might act. They act differently once they put on the attire and now become a representation of an organization. It keeps a relationship limited to the context at hand. Let me provide an example. So boundaries. Bankers have a duty to represent the bank and to be honest with their clients, right? And we want them to be honest because that's us. Our money is involved here. So a banker, we have, as a banker, if they have to tell a client they have insufficient funds, that's the truth. But it's also representing the bank, also represents the client's best interest, yet it's still a business. So the duty, the client's best interest is to do the job ably. So you're either, it matters in ownership and dedication, integrity, responsibility that the client is as honest with their bringing in of their dollars as it is that they trust that entity, that bank would be trustworthy with their money. And when you have a banker that has to tell a client that they have an insufficient funds, that could elicit a lot of emotions, not necessarily real, true emotions, but that client might become angry because maybe they weren't aware. If you've ever had an overcharge or banked in any situation, then you might be aware, that happens. So that's one way we can look at something. All right, so I looked at another University of Bristol. They talked about business key behaviors of managing self, doing personal skills, delivering excellent service. A lot of times when I do private consulting, I'm working with businesses in crises, and I start looking back at their business models, look back at how they promote their self, and then what's the reality when you start interviewing other people, and where's the differences, and well, how do we relate this into mediation and neutrality? Well, I'm going to bring up emotional intellect. You know that. This is specific because in this World Symposium, we are global it's different cultures, it's different genders, it's different identity, different life experiences. Like your Vikram, your life experience is not going to be the same. Well, the other uniqueness is you're a man and I'm not, but I identify as a woman, you identify as whatever you identify with. But then we now have a society here in the United States where they are allowed to say, what do they identify? How do they identify themselves? And this will be another complexity that will become very difficult for mediations unless we can decide that mediation works with and for people and claim how we are treating them, no matter how they see their identity, what their culture experience is, how their gender, what they have, traumas have they experienced, and as they become emotionally intellect, how are we going to model this for them in a mediation? That's a lot of what behavior is when we talk about neutrality. It's a business space in my mind. Doctors have a business space. They should. Bankers have a business space, but they also have an obligation to make sure the funds are exact to the penny. And honesty is not an option. It is required. Now, if they make a mistake, then you have to litigate it to get it fixed, or they go back and they fix it on their own. Either way, it requires, you're messing with money that matters, how a person is able to live outside of their, however they bring their money income home. So it's effective. It's an applicable approach in my mind. So I started looking at some other websites. There's a mastro.com. I might pop that up in some of the information a little bit later review, but it's 12 common behaviors to overcome like unprofessional behaviors. And I'm going to quote it. Professionalism is a reflection of your character, your values, your effectiveness, your competency. It is the image that others have of you and lies at the junction of your behavior, skills, and knowledge, end quote. They go on to talk about being timely and punctual, and this is a business concept. Being honest, the lack of integrity is the opposite. So if we don't have integrity, we don't have honesty, we don't have really a conversation because it's not reality. So we need to establish here through some of these concepts and the business concept that neutrality is obtainable if we put on the professional hat. So taking responsibility is part of that. Being reliable, we want to tell our clients we're going to start the mediation this date, time, this location. If it's judge ordered, it's this time, this location. And the matters, is it civil court, is it family, is it domestic violence? That depends on how a mediator might decide how will they function to start this process. It would matter to me because if it's domestic violence, I'm going to probably want to have it in the court system with the bailiff. But if it's a family issue and they aren't showing, a violence towards one another, I feel like we can be more relaxed and we can have it more a generic area, like another business office or something, or in some cases a church building, or a neutral area that has no interest to either party. Are we organized? Are we attentive? Are we appropriate in our appearances? Are we diligent and consistent that we are relaying to our clients that we want to offer fair time for each of them? Like if I break out in private caucus, I'm going to tell both parties, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do an opener, give me what your opinions are, why you're here, and then give the other, plaintiff and defendant, they get the same time. And I got to listen to that. And then I'm going to take notes and I'm going to make them aware. I'm going to write down notes, but I'm going to throw this away at the end of this mediation. None of it stays in my possession. And you show them by when you're done, you shred it in front of them. I do that because I want them to feel like it was a trustworthy process. Because we know a lot of times when we are in a mediation that it's emotions that are played. A lot of emotional drama comes in, but in a court of law, it's mostly facts. So it won't really necessarily play on emotions at all. So we give our clients an option to participate with more control over how it's going to go and what the end result might be, that they can live with it. Another quote, professional is a code. It's a standard for conducting business. That's true. It is. We are in a business. And so if we think in these terms as a mediator, are we doing the right thing? Are we going the extra mile? Are we humble? Are we respectful? Are we kind? Are we modeling good behaviors? Vikram, in that last session I talked about a mental toolbox, and we define empathy as it's viewed. I looked up Oxford languages, the definition of empathy as they define it, the ability to understand and share feelings of another. Well, when Bernie was talking, Bernie shared with us in his opening remarks to Neutrality and Mediation Symposium, quote, words from the neutrality trap are disrupting and connecting for social change. Well, Bernie, he's got many books on the subject, and he has an interest in this topic, and it's applicable. We probably do well to read some of it, but if we're just listening, we still are hearing good things here. I'll keep mentioning some other stuff. I wanted to also thank Bernie for his words in the opening remarks, and thank you for bringing him in, Vikram.
It's always a pleasure actually listening to Bernie.
Yes. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying it's always a pleasure listening to Bernie. Of course, that evolution of a mediator series with him is continuing, which is going to, it's in January, we're doing the next episode of that. So
yes,
tune in is what I have to say.
I will. It's a pleasure to discuss EI. What's EI? It's emotional intelligence, and how does it work in my life as a mediator, as a mother and a wife, professional work in healthcare business. I've mentioned that earlier. We have a unique opportunity to expand our life experience learning and how we employ EI strategies and what we're doing here. I looked up some stuff on Penn State on code of conduct is for mediators, and a quote, mediators have a duty to remain impartial, aware of lack of impartiality. Impartiality throughout the mediation process. So if we become aware of a lack of impartiality, they shall immediately disclose to the parties they cannot remain impartial and withdraw from mediation. I've had to do this only one or two times, but it really ended up not being just about a bias that I had, but it was no longer that I felt like it was a safe environment for the parties to mediate. And if I feel that, then my bias is I cannot come to a resolution with you in this manner. So I will end it. And I will, if I feel, for a couple of things. One, psychologically, they're just not ready to have good conversations, or they become volatile in the meeting. I'm going to leap over to ethics and mediation. There's typically 9 standards, I feel like. Self-determining, impartiality, conflict of interest, mediator competence, confidentiality. Again, we're talking about, can I give you information that you're not going to share with the other party until I say you can share it with the other party? But in the court of law, that's open and aired right in front of everyone. In cases where a jury is there, it's all aired there, and it's all facts. It's just how do we advertise or solicit work, fees and other charges, advancing mediation process. We do a lot of pro bono. We talked about that, and that's goodwill towards helping people do well when they can't afford the process otherwise. Another empathy definition by the dictionary.com, empathy is the ability of practice of imagining or trying to deeply understand what someone else is feeling or what it's like to be in their shoes. We, as mediators, we want to build trust, we build rapport, and we need to use EI strategies to keep our emotions in check. And we are trying also, by using a lot of these standards of practice, to keep our clients in check so that it's still a safe environment for them to participate in a mediation without having to litigate it. But when we practice mindfulness, I brought that up also when we talked last. Mindfulness is always a good choice. We use empathy. If we as mediators are active mediations with parties and we're sitting across from one another, empathy is vital because we're going to use body language. We encourage time to listen to each other and views of their conflict. I mentioned that I might have a client, both plaintiff and defendant give me a 5-minute synopsis of what it is for them. What does this conflict look like to them? What's their experience? And then we got to hash through it. I watch body language, nonverbal cues. I'm looking at how they're sitting in their chair, their posture, leaning forward, back, or crossing their arms, or twiddling with their thumbs, or do they need to fidget? And I use that as a chance to give a client a break if they need a break. But it also, I need to be mindful of does that environment, do they need a cool down? Do they need that break? Do I feel like the truth is fully being contributed in that? So then back to emotional concepts and looking on the internet, I looked up at Berkeley, Greater Good Science Center, berkeley.com. The ability of the sense to other people's emotions coupled with the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. This is where I bring in that psychology, the philosophy, psychology part of it. Psychology behind EI, emotional intelligence. There's a website you can go to, psychologytoday.com. It suggests 4 components of self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, relationship management. You could go to sciencealert.com. You can look, it's in quote, most of the experts agree that there's a scientific evidence for emotional intellect and intelligence. This is because the EI scores can predict how other measurable outcomes in a similar way to IQ. Now we think of IQ as it's a number in a specific population. It's an average, a number in a population, but EI is not measured that way. So if it's shown to correlate with positive relationships and career success, and that's again on sciencealert.com. Emotional intelligence and social awareness is some more things that we need to talk about. We read other people through body language. We people watch. Empathy is important here because it's understand people behave the way they do. An example in movies. Movies are created in such a way to appeal to our emotions. It gives us a way to laugh, to cry, to be sad, or to be mad. I mean, it allows us to feel emotions that we might not always show, but if we understand it, neuroscience of empathy, you can also look this in through Association of Psychology Science. In 2017, Kim Armstrong wrote, "I feel your pain, the neuroscience of empathy." Excuse me. And I explored that work and I looked at it, and Armstrong shared that mirroring the mind in a subtext. So it's quoted. Christian Keijer was from the Netherlands. I know you had some guy that was going to be talking from the Netherlands. We didn't get to hear him, but this came from the Netherlands Institute. Now I'll quote, "When we witness what happened to others, we don't just activate the visual cortex like we thought some decades ago. We also activate our actions as if we'd be acting in similar ways. So we activate our emotions and sensations as if we felt the same. And Kaiser also wrote it. It was co-authored by Gonzalo. I'm sorry, I probably did not pronounce that correctly, but it's at Social Brain Lab, and they found that observing a person's actions, pain, or effect can trigger parts of the same neural networks responsible for executing the actions of feeling firsthand. So the study that was done by them asked participants to watch a video in person, so of grasping a ball hidden in a large bin. And in one condition, the participants determined whether or not the person in the video hesitated before selecting a ball, a theory of the mind task, is supposed. So using transcranial magnetic stimulation combination. And here's where I come in with the medical history background. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm dealing with allergies. So there's this a form of magnetic resonance imaging, but this one has got it's the same technology they use for MRIs, but it's a advanced, non-invasive test that uses this field, but then also adds radio waves to create imagery. But in the fMRI, it looks at blood flow in the vessels, and will capture a computed element to help doctors understand how the brain works. And it's thought that it might be able to help us understand is a person telling the truth or not. It's interesting. So it's something to look at if that neuroscience is something appealing to you. Another thought, and this was understood.org. This was about teachers and teachers teaching empathy to our students. So we're looking at, as a mother, I can relate to this because as my kids advanced, it had to be teaching age-appropriate ways how to have empathy. And I noticed when I told you, we talked in our first conversation in a symposium about the colonization and decolonization, I brought it up. But in this particular instance, understood.org is talking about teachers teaching empathy and teachers practicing empathy. And it's important because we're students and we need to know how to practice empathy. So it's applicable here. What are we directed to do in this article is think about what's happening below the surface of our thoughts. And oftentimes when I'm speaking, I bring this up to a lot of businesses, a lot of works, because students, if we're mothers, we're fathers, we are aunts, we're uncles, or we have friends with children, or we go out in public, you're going to see people in different ages and emotional stages as well. So it's applicable here. If we apply this article looking at how teachers are teaching empathy in the classroom, it suggests it's easy to overlook what's happening when the students and focus on what's happening in the teacher's mind. So let's think if you are dealing with students with a lot of energy, or they might be saying that they have attention deficits, or they have, a myriad of other contributions that they believe might be not revealed necessarily in the classroom setting. And what's the teacher's role? How's it come about? And how do we use it? And it suggests that it's easier we overlook what's happening. So we've got to look underneath the surface of a problem. So in the conclusion in this particular article is talk about showing empathy can help change the dynamics in the classroom, so that it's not only acknowledge and consider what you see and feel as a teacher, but what you don't see, what we have to think about. What is this student experiencing? So this might be challenges that we have to consider. and we talked about it in our other conversation, is challenges to consider is trauma. Our friends in the Ukraine, what kind of trauma are they dealing with? The ones that are still there. But what about the ones that had to leave, but they have family still there? And we can't know, the other one can't know what the other one's going. It's just pure speculation because it's just horrible in every way. But if we think about that, and in the teaching classroom idea, do we think about hunger as a part of this problem? And in this case, in the United States, a lot of schools are offering free meals because they realize that hunger is a big issue, and economics was driving it because the parents weren't, let's say when, and it's not just inclusive to when COVID came, the pandemic hit, but economics, before people had money to contribute to meals, kids went without food. And when I was a child, that happened to me. I would be sent off to school because my mom didn't have money. I might not eat. And it was back before you could get a free breakfast or a free lunch. And school lunches, that really did matter in its success. So as I can speak to that happening to me personally, I also learned from it, and I never let my kids go without a meal. My kids have no idea what it's like to be hungry because they never had to be hungry. But if we start looking at social elements, let's stop for a minute. Let's go back to Ukraine because it's a world thing right now. I bet there's people who are hungry, and from both sides of this opposition. The soldiers are hungry. Maybe the people that are living in the Ukraine are starving. They don't have heat. I mean, there's so many elements to this. What can we nourish the brain in our minds so we can act functional? And, in these crises, it would be expected that we just can't keep up if we're not well nourished. So I bring that up just for that, so that we can see how empathy and different elements that play into that big life idea. Speaking of big life, there's a big life journal, and it was published October 22. And it talked about key strategies to teach children empathy. I'm playing on this again because I'll bring it out with you in a little bit. Ashley Cullens wrote this article. The quote is, "Before you criticize or judge someone, walk a mile in their shoes." That is a very common phrase used in the States here. I don't know culturally other states that's, in other world, I don't know what your main quotes would be in India, or, we talk about the Netherlands or others. But empathy can be a focus. So let's think of it in this concept. Empathy concept is a key ingredient in positive friendships and relationships, right? And it reduces conflict and misunderstanding. It leads to helping behaviors and kindness and greater successes in life in general. And this is, again, on the Big Life Journal 2022. An example they use to describe and label it says, help children recognize their emotions and body. So I told you earlier, I watch body language, and I use that to see how clients are doing. I do it in a lot of ways, but in this case, it's saying help children recognize their emotions by call it out. You're clenching your fist. You stomped your feet. You seem angry. And as negotiation too, as mediators, negotiators, we're always reframing. And reframing in this way calls to attention a behavior and the specific actions in that behavior. And is it tied to an emotion? And if we call it, what do we want to come from that? It's going to be an experiential learning. And this goes back to EI, experiencing life learning. So also when I was looking up something, I looked up Caleb McCary in May of 2018. He wrote why empathy is important. And this is going to go back and tie in healthcare, business, and all this other stuff. This go in clinical settings where many of our person-to-person encounters, in this particular case, would be a caregiver. In clinical settings where many of the person-to-person encounters as a caregiver has in a day are with the patient facing sometimes health issues, and using empathy in professional life is necessary. So if we talk about elder abuse or something of that, the fear that elder might feel as a patient in a facility, and as we were in COVID lockdown, a lot of fear was there because healthcare, they couldn't bring their loved ones in to see them. There was inconsistencies from their daily routine, and we started seeing elder abuse and some other issues. And that particular article can call it out to say, beyond a clinical setting of understanding empathy is vital to the formation of real emotions and how it connects with another human being. In an age where much of our interactions happen through screens, we talked about this earlier, but this is important too, as we talk about in an age of interactions with screens and emojicons and arts, of authenticity of connecting with other people is kind of something that we need to work harder at and be more conscious of, because I will tell you, I don't understand all these emojicons that my kids have on their phones. And it pops up on all of our cell phones, but if we use it wrong, then aren't we possibly going to do something that might be offensive? Correct? Right? It's important. Well, it's the same concept of connecting with another person in something that we need to work harder at, because the consciousness of that selection of that emoji, Mom, why'd you use that? Okay, well, I thought it might be saying a hug, but it might not be saying that at all. And so you have to listen to your children. Hey, Mom, that's not how you use that. And I own that. That's experiential learning, and my children will use it on me. And that's okay. We need to be able to understand it, because this is how our world communicates right now. So it makes us giggle, but it is a concept that we need to think about. Society, relationships, and how we thrive. What is communication like? Like recently, one of my sons, I will not name, had his first date. Let me just tell you, he's just as scared as everything to go on that first date. But, we're talking on a phone or in a text is not really threatening. It's kind of a comforting, safe area, but it's not reality if you want to have a new relationship, right? And you agree with that? So I had to have a little conversation about, maybe if you really want to convey a thought or an emotion, perhaps you should talk to him in person and not try to convey it via a text or an emojicon, right? But this applies here because we are dealing with clients that's how they communicate. We're going to have to figure it out. Like, no, we might not have to hash out what your color of your heart or the number of hugs or what that symbol means, but what is the intent or the driver underneath to which you're communicating with a person in conflict, right? So we'll just rein that back in. If we advance empathy, the big difference between a professional understanding and a non-professional is basics or between a basic and advancing practice of empathy. The difference is training and regular exposure. And that's true. As healthcare business applies here, any of us that have been a patient, we know that we want our providers to be exposed a lot to the illness that we're talking about. And if they don't have a good understanding on it, we're not going to go there and trust them, right? So as mediators, we're going to have to keep evolving our understanding of how our communities are interacting on the cell phones or these computers, or, we may not always have the pleasure of getting to see our faces in live context as you're doing here and recording it. But I think the regular exposure to sort out community dirty laundry, right? In mediation, we're sorting out conflicts, and the phrase of sorting out dirty laundry matters because people can understand what that means in some cultures, not all. But but it's a concept that emotions that are fueled by conflict require us to remain professionally aware of what lies below the surface. And I use an iceberg analogy a lot of times when I'm working with patients, or now I don't really work with patients anymore. I'm out of kind of direct patient care, but this iceberg analogy I use when I'm consulting with maybe hospitals that are asking me to come in and consult HR because they've got an issue that they want me to resolve. And oftentimes I'll bring up the Titanic. Are you familiar with the Titanic?
Yes.
So the Titanic, what was its biggest advertisement? Unsinkable, right? Well, it turned out it was very sinkable, right? But how we apply this, the conflict in the iceberg, is the Titanic, when it was being launched, they did not anticipate that they were going to run that boat into an iceberg or that it would sink. But they were very confident, that so much so that they said it's unsinkable. Well, if they weren't thinking about an iceberg, exactly what else were they thinking might not sink their ship? But if we use this in an emotional concept, well, what might not sink you emotionally? Well, if you don't understand it, then you're not going to complete your voyage. You're going to have emotions with hidden meaning. You're not going to be looking under the surface, and you're not really going to be very aware. This brings me to think about resolving conflict at work. Ken Cloke wrote, and Joan Goldsmith wrote this book. I know you know Ken. You use him. He's giving our closing remarks here. But this analogy that I say I always use, iceberg, is powerful. But they call it iceberg of conflict. And in this book, Ken and Joan, they talk about it. And so at the very, you've got like this triangle, and at the very tip of it is the issues that we see, and everything else is messy and below it. In that book, Ken and Joan, they said personalities, emotions, interests, needs, desires, self-perception, self-esteem, hidden expectations, unresolved issues from the past are all a part of that. That's heavy. That's a whole lot different than that one little tip of okay, the Titanic, you're about to sink, but you don't see it. So they didn't take in consideration that if they hit a big iceberg, it might sink. They didn't. And a lot of people lost their lives, all of them. But it was also very cold water. It wasn't explored well. It was also the time that it was built. And, one might say it might be false advertising if we want to have a little fun here, business concept. But Joan and Ken, they talked about the concept of unearthing what is beneath the surface of conflict. Well, then we have to focus on ourselves. And if we want to help our clients have a better way, let's go back to that bank analogy where they're representing the bank, but in the client's best interest, they say you have insufficient funds, and they have to be honest and tell the client that that's that. Did the client not know? Did they do their own research? Did they not know that they weren't bringing in money, or did they write out checks too fast? I mean, there's so many different variables that can come to that curiosity of that. But Joan and Ken, they want us to know about focusing on ourselves. It's our personal iceberg. So we got to be curious. We can't just say it's not going to be sinkable. You're going to have a perfect life, and you're no longer going to have any problems in your life, and you're no longer be in the conflicts. Well, we know we can't make that offer in this life. We can't. But how do we use this understanding and take a risk and probe a little deeper, help people become more honest, allow them to kind of start to have conversations that are honest in the courts and mediation, neutralities? How does the mediator stay honest? We have to understand shame, anger, judgment. We have to understand a lot of these thoughts that are coming into play when we're mediating conflicts, because egos get in the way. So it's a thought that at least I was thinking of when I read this with Ken and what Ken and Joan wrote. But being honest with self-appraisal and listening to the comments of others and learning from that, like I gave an example of my children learning from me as they needed to learn so that they could know how to function outside home. But we, as parents, that's what we have to do. But we have to be honest in our communications. We have to listen and acknowledge. I didn't always listen to them. Sometimes I was overpowered by 3 loud children when I was tired and needed to go to bed, and their bedtime wasn't for them, it was for me. But this concept is, how do I become a better mother? Well, I became a better mother when I learned how to communicate better. And this concept works outside of this reference, and it works in business, it works in mediation, it works in relationships, it works in how I treat you, how you treat me, respect of your time. We find a way to reconnect with others. We find forms of honest expression that allow others to save face, right? That happens. They talk about that in the book. So we discontinue judgmental descriptions of character behaviors that others might display, and we have to bring to the surface alternative ways for our clients to achieve personal goals. And basically, this is the end of my talk, but the bias here is it's complex. It's what you allow it to be. It's a thought where I'm thinking, if we just step back and see that neutrality in a professional realm can be attained, and it's a behavior we don't need to grow tired in talking about. It's an expectation that many career paths have: doctors, nurses, lawyers, judges. It's all there. Our teachers, we expect that they would be aware of how to teach, and if they're not, then we don't want them to teach our children. Governing bodies. Now, this one's a little bit harder because we are having votes in free world to appoint our leaders. But there are countries that don't have that option, and their leadership, they don't get to vote. And we see crises that come up from that. And I think it does stem from traumas, expectations, egos, behaviors. It's complex, don't you think? So, but I want to say thank you for having me here. That's my thoughts on neutrality and mediation as I see it in this symposium. Thank you, Vikram, for having me. You have always a pleasure to speak with, and I hope I'll have more opportunities to do it.
Thank you, Melanie. Of course, like always, bringing up a lot of things, which throwing it all out there. And of course, the idea of these topics that I put out, I try and keep them so general. Let's see what people come up with. No direction, whatever. But before that, let me tell Eileen that Elizabeth has said hi to her on LinkedIn. So they did what, masters together, Eileen? I don't know if Eileen is there listening, but Elizabeth had said that. And the other thing you said about Netherlands, we had Herman. Herman was there today. Very nice session. Now, all the sessions today in the morning, my morning, perfect. Very, very nice. Milan brought in a very interesting part of it. Herman, then Greg, his thoughts. Really, I mean, you must watch these. All 3 of them were really nice. And so, Eileen, have you said hi to Elizabeth on LinkedIn?
Hi, Lizzie.
I don't know whether she stayed back that long. I don't know what way, but yes.
Yeah, we're in the same program.
Yeah, but that's finished, isn't it? Is it done, or is it still going on?
Well, I don't know where she's at, but I mean, I did my qual exams and all the courses, and now I'm in dissertation mode. So, yeah.
Best wishes to you. Mercy.
Yeah, it's a long journey.
Yes, it is. I can applaud you for your efforts. Keep going.
I know. It's like, why am I doing this? Okay. But
no, you're doing it because you've got a bigger purpose. It won't always be hard. You'll sleep again, maybe one day.
But now, Melanie, what we have to look at is the aspect of journalists, news anchors, and broadcasters, and media and neutrality. I think that part that you started with, I think we need one discussion on that by itself. So, I mean, is it connected? I don't know. I'm not saying it's connected. It is not. I'm not going to say anything.
Well, it could be, because aren't we getting some of our information in that way? And if that's the only way we get information, then it really is a big player.
It's a big discussion. It's a major discussion, but my focus is mediation, so I'm not. I might not have that discussion, but it's a discussion that's required for sure. And lots of ideas in relation to topics. Now, look, right now for 2023, I'm looking at topics. So today also, when we were having these discussions, I was looking at what topics came out. So from your thing, topics that came out were emotional intelligence and mediation, neuroscience and mediation. So we'll have those discussions during the next year. But I have to put it all out there. And you said, I know Ken and I use him. You're absolutely right. I totally use him. I always tell him that now I take this opportunity to talk about the work I'm doing because no one listens to me. I'm out there putting out all the posts.
No, I disagree with you. But Ken, I share a fondness with him and Joan. They're really special and very wise in their works and his life experiences. And in some of their books, he actually reveals that some of their judgments changed as their life experiences came. And it's in the works. And I'm sure Ken wouldn't mind to talk about that. But it was probably one of the biggest things that I believe attracted me to the concepts of studying it is if we can be life learners, and then maybe we read it as what came just by facts as others saw it, but then we didn't have it until we understand it and we see it differently. Can we be honest and say we see it differently? I think we should be. And I do. I hope we do. And I don't mind being corrected. I told you my kids have corrected me on some stuff. And it wasn't intentional because some of this stuff I just don't understand. It's generational stuff. So I wouldn't expect that some of us would understand the think of a mind of a 19-year-old when we're in our 50s, 60s, or 70s, right? So we're still raising these kids. But again, thank you for having me. I hope we'll have more conversations. Ladies, it was nice to meet you today.
But I had to put out that use him thing because I'm saying that I do use him, and I keep saying you're the face of the dispute resolution revolution. And on the emoji part of it, let me tell you, we use that emoji. It looks like a namaste emoji and everyone uses it. But it all started off as a high five. It was supposed to be a high five emoji. And the world now uses it as a namaste emoji. So things change, things go in that direction.
Yes, and namaste. Some people say I'm praying for you and use that symbol. So it's evolving to mean different things to different people in different areas, different age groups. So that's true. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So Eileen, anything for Melanie? Anything that you want to?
No, a lot of insights, of course. I think, also I'm a mother, and I remember when I started my program, my son basically said, if you want to be a conflict resolution practitioner, Mom, you need to practice being peaceful. And I was like, what do you mean I'm not peaceful? So like that whole self-reflection, right? When we enter the field and how we evolve as a practitioner, you touched upon that. I think we just become more authentic and more in tune to our intuition. I think Bernie Mayer also said that over time, you use your skills, your human communication skills, your emotional intelligence to really hopefully transform difficult situations. Yep. And when you're new practicing, you don't have these skills in your toolkit. And, as you progress through life, you adopt those things. And it's, too bad we didn't adopt them like 20 years ago. Right. And so I really think, this constant reflection of who we are and what we have. And I love what you just said, Vikram, the dispute resolution revolution. That's really it. It's time for a design revolution on how we communicate and interact with each other. And once we master that, how much better things would be, And so maybe that's kind of idealism, but I think that's our guiding mantra for all of us is to try to make the world a better place. And unfortunately, we have to do it with humans who are very complex. And, things like neutrality and being impartial is extremely difficult because we're all programmed. We all have our biases, right? And to unprogram ourselves so that how can we get rid of these bad cognitive patterns, these things that are really blocking success. I mean, it's, a lot of this comes from the brain, right? And how we're wired. And so I think, culturally, we're wired differently. Businesses are wired for bottom line at the expense of, the employees. So, we have a lot of serious challenges. So that's just kind of a little bit of a,
Aline is,
you reframed it beautifully. Well done.
Aline is not participating in the symposium because she felt she might not be able to contribute. I don't know what she thought, but look, she is contributing. So yes, you had lots to contribute. But in terms of the dispute resolution revolution is what I put it out there. Whether idealistic, I don't know. Look, I keep saying this is my bubble. In my bubble, I am allowed to be idealistic. And
I appreciate that. That's great.
So in that whole mediation circles and all, that's the way it's going to be. Look, Elizabeth has put a question for you because this is really your question. So Mandy, you want to come in before this or after Melanie answers the question? What do you want to say? Do your wish, totally your wish. Okay, we'll take the question up. Let's take Elizabeth's question. She says, how can neutral empathy be reached? How can mediators accept emotional reactions even when they are perceived as being excessive or even hostile?
Is she inexperienced? Is she a mediator?
Yeah, she's all. Yes. I can say she's Ellen's friend. That's what I can. She's been on the show. She was last symposium. She did a Spanish thing also in philosophy and mediation with Gabriela. So yes, she's also a mediator.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I think that neutrality, wearing that professional hat, it becomes unearthing the igloo concept of how do we put on that professional hat? How do we handle these emotions that are ongoing, whether or not you decide to see that they're there or not? It's going to require that we reevaluate how we want people to communicate, what really drives their conflicts, and our role in that is, you're a plaintiff and a defendant for a reason. You don't see eye to eye on something. But if you break it down, why do we not see this X, Y, or Z? It's because you didn't see A, B, C. You've got to let the fuel that's up underneath all of this, these underlying drivers, surface, or you'll really not get to a really good resolution that's going to be attainable. And revisiting the court systems and becoming a revolving door is something we don't want to continue to see, because it affects, people. It costs money, and you want to help give them a mental toolbox that they can be successful in choosing how they're going to resolve these conflicts. And then as a mediator, we model that. We don't throw out suggestions per se. But it is how we model our listening, active listening skills. Are we giving, acknowledging that they have their emotions or whatever I mentioned when I open it up. I say, you get your 5 minutes, you get your 5 minutes. And then if I have to divide them up and break out caucus and we continue to discover these drivers, then we have to surface and be creative in how we're going to work with these clients to get to resolution. So I think creativity and professional hats do matter here. And if she wants to add anything else to that, I'm happy to hear it. But without being able to give a specific example, I do think it requires that we unearth and think of our own senses and think about our own conflicts. And then as we continue to evolve and grow emotionally aware and can use these EI skills, then we model it and maybe help them be in a better way. So that's how I do it.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is also, I'm going to put Ellen on the spot and she will answer what Elizabeth, her fellow student, colleague, whatever, has put down there. So Ellen, I'm going to come to that question with you after Mandy gives her comments. And
here, can you repeat the question?
I will. I'll put it up, but before that, let's get Mandy in because Mandy's been there, definitely wanting to say something. Yes, Mandy, please.
I can wait for a
no issue. No, please. After you, we'll do that after you.
Yep. What I was thinking all this time you had this beautiful speech, Melanie, was this question you had at the beginning: can we be truly neutral?
Yes.
Which I believe is difficult to say yes, because we don't even have consciousness of all the things we do and say. So we could, for that reason, we couldn't answer for sure.
Unconscious
Even
bias.
if we do the best. But I believe that I hope we can go close to the neutrality, because I believe is very important. Trust, of course, is important. Respect is much more important. I say much more important because I believe the trust is more important from the participant to himself and not to us. From us, I believe it's much more important to help them trust themselves, to respect them. But I think humility is a way that we can go closer as possible to neutrality.
Can I share another thought?
What's your opinion?
I was thinking about unconscious bias here. How does that develop? What does it look like when it shows up in our workplace or in our own minds? Unconscious bias. It's designed for learners to, when I'm teaching as a consultant and presenting EI tactics, I oftentimes bring this up because I can use brain games and facts and kind of global environments to help leaders and their managers and their frontline workers begin to strategize and recognize unconscious bias and unconscious bias hiding in job postings, and how is it sneaking into your resume citing? How is it sabotaging interviews? How is it well, I brought up Indeed as a business app earlier on in this session. I brought it up for this reason. Human resource professionals and hiring managers, they zero in on unconscious bias in recruitment and hiring. And I'm not really sure that they're good at it, but it's something on paper or on their screen, their slide projection of what their interactions or best intentions and efforts to bring someone on board is going to look like. That's where I was going with that.
You said that interesting example with the glasses. You use this very useful because it's a very optical. And I was thinking also, how many possibilities do we have to wear your glasses and be able to see? It's the same degrees or the same point. You have to make this focus.
Yep. The focal point.
Yes. So it's a very few possibilities. So to make them see through the right view, if we think our view is the right one, it is with our glasses. So humility, that's why I said, and I believe that humility is a safe way to neutrality and to respect.
Yes, and I would use that to even say that's how I believe. I appreciate you catching that idea. I came up with the lens, but I teach my children and I teach others through that same concept. But you really need to bring it in a way that people understand in the world what these are for. And if they wear contacts and they have either an opinion, they want to use them or they don't. Or if they need visual assistance, that they might, if they can use the contacts medically safe, they will. But they also make contacts that have weights in them to bring it back into focus. And that's a very, very specific, and even fewer of us could look through that lens. So if you think of this creativity, all of us, if we have the gift of sight, and if we have the gift of hearing and the other senses, then we have a way to approach people in a way that they can relate. We just have to be creative with it. And I tend to be creative. I throw a lot of information out, but I hope by the end of time I've talked with them, they at least picked up, at least I could bring it up in the one sense that somebody could pick up in that crowd. You know, like I used to think as a young parent, now this is decades ago, I used to think that louder meant better communication. And it was the most horrible idea ever. And that concept is I tried to speak over 3 kids that were louder than me and stop this, please eat this, please do this, please do that. And we get exhausted in that process. But as they became older, the only way that I felt like I could be share empathy is to be more relatable to them. I had to learn down that volume doesn't equal understanding. And then when I'm teaching other people, I've got to find other ways to draw them in. So if I can use an analogy of glasses or hearing aids or visual concept or emojis or whatever it is, and I threw out a lot today, but somebody can pick up on it. So if you're making a lecture, or if you're presenting, or you're working with these people, you can find a way to connect with them in a way that they can put and process it. And then once they see that you picked up on that and they can relate, then you start breaking it down. You see success, you know, life experiential learning. It happens from making mistakes or making good choices. And then you can share on that, reflect on that, reframe it in your conversations, reframe in as a mother. Once my kids started seeing how I was talking to them differently or approaching them differently, the conversations became far more successful and helpful. And it started with me saying, I'm sorry, I didn't get it. I needed to learn this and this. I thank you for, would you please forgive me? Because restoring relationships is in this neutrality concept. Well, that works because I do family mediation, and sitting and writing out a parenting plan is horrible, and I don't like doing them. But when you have to do it, you're working with adults who don't communicate well, dealing with children who don't know how to communicate and have no idea what's about to happen to them. And all of their decisions are about to be made because of that piece of paper being the default when they can't talk to each other. And in the court of law, once that document's signed, when the parents can no longer communicate, that's their default. If we're always giving our friends, our peers, only a default and never exploring or growing, we're really not doing a service. So I feel like I need to always be evolving, learning, reading, searching to share awarenesses and social elements and playful elements, and just me as a person. I want people to feel heard and understood. And a lot of times just listening, it doesn't equal intellect like IQ, but most of them can apply in emotions. People know what feeling sad feels like. People know what laughing. We feel happy when we're laughing. But it also can mean that we're making fun of someone when we're laughing. And for that child in the classroom that's not understanding that they are being they feel laughed at instead of laughed with, we have to break it down. So that's how I come up with a lot of my little stories that I come up with playfully. Is we have to make it relatable, understandable, approachable. Sometimes personal reflection and admitting maybe you didn't see things the right way the first go around.
So now,
right?
Eileen is answering that Elizabeth's question. Eileen, I put it in the chat.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Mandy.
But I would like to say to Melanie that I like very much stories and examples. Yesterday we were talking with Vikram for an elephant and some ants,
yes,
some mouses.
I listened to that.
All the speech, yes. And this, I realized that in conversation and sharing, how nice is it? Because for the glasses, I was thinking while you were talking that, yes, I have my own glasses have to be for me, of course, but since I have presbyopia, and for the first time I didn't remember to get glasses with me. So I was going to the court, and suddenly I was realizing I can't see, or I was going to have a speech, and I was taking the others. Do you have glasses? Yes, thank you. And I was putting the others' glasses, and I was, of course, it's very beautiful that you can share the tools. And we as mediators have the tools to share with participants. We share the glasses of presbyopia, all the guys, because we don't wear them all the time. So it is very, everybody forgets the glasses. So everybody's wearing the other's glasses. Or maybe we can sit on our glasses and break them. So we can say to the mediator or the guy, because when we are in a conflict, maybe our glasses break because we have so many feelings and we are anxious and
I like that.
blocked. So it is like we have sitting on our glasses and have broken. And then there is the mediator who is at that time neutral and has clear mind and eyes, and he can help us see or lead us, because maybe we are even blind.
Oftentimes we are.
So we need somebody to trust and respect us, to help us go where we want to go, of course, because when somebody's blind and he's asking for help, he doesn't say, take me anywhere you believe is good for me, but he says, please take me there. So we have to understand where he wants to go, so we can help him go there with his own will. And we have this story about also, again, with the eyes, which is, I mean, we can talk for hours about and say stories that come on our minds. It is the justice, the Themis. Do you hear me?
No, we don't,
Yeah.
Mandy. We can't hear
I'm
you.
listening.
We heard nothing that you said at all. Of course, we heard you, Mandy. We heard you.
Yes.
She's got frozen.
you know,
So she's frozen, I think. No, but what I wanted was Eileen was answering Elizabeth's question, and I was waiting for that answer from her. I put it in the chat, Eileen. One sec, Mandy. We'll come to you. 1 sec. We'll just come to you. Your signal seems to be a problem. Yeah, Eileen, please.
All right. So, how can neutral empathy be reached? Well, I think that's obviously difficult. What comes to mind is right now, these definitions for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. There's a lot of writing about that, and I'm kind of trying to think that's really it. There's a famous definition from a man named Rock Sharma, who says, I acknowledge, honor, and celebrate your existence. You are not invisible to me. And I think that is kind of maybe embodies what neutral empathy is that we're all here in this room. You know, I respect each of you. I'm here to celebrate that and I think when you have that kind of peacefulness in you, you exhibit that with your parties or those people that are disputing. So that can be my best answer to neutral empathy is, you know, that you bring into that mediation or conflict that energy, and you're there to diffuse situations. You need to mirror what's going on. And when people are getting out of hand, so if they're the emotional reactions, I mean, I think that's they're researching a lot about this in the US, that it's in positive that people explode, that the conflicts reach a point that they're finally out in the open because we're suppressing that, or we're finding ways to. So how do you allow for emotions to go wild for a period of time, right? And then
we have to do it safely.
Right. So you have to have that safe space, right? And as mediators, when people come, they're vulnerable. Yep. So that's why I think conflict coaching is really important before mediation. So if you can have one-on-one, just like you were talking about, Melanie, just unearthing, discovering what's really going on. If you go into a mediation, you haven't figured that out yet, there's going to be a lot of this, spontaneity, things getting out of hand. So maybe really proper research and really maybe a couple prior consulting, conflict coaching sessions with those clients would help that come out. So when you're coming into the mediation, you're talking about your common interest and not your locked in positions. Because, if you're going first into the boxing ring, everybody's going to knock each other out and they're going to want to win and show they're right. And then you have to go through that little tango dance of each person's trying to, show they're right. And you have to, manage that. So if you could manage it before you're really in a room together and prep the scene, I think that's really important to this, our work as mediators.
I've mediated. Oh, go ahead.
I was saying Ken Cloke in one of his sessions had said you have to create conflict to resolve conflict. So, yeah, Melanie, you were saying something.
I've mediated cases where I didn't want to read discoveries from the litigators prior to the mediation, so that I could truly go in with, let me just get information from them, because sure enough, I can get discoveries on, if I want it ahead of time, but to help me try to see where clients want to be heard, the best way of active listening, wanting to get information, is to have not heard it first, and at least not in a different way. Let it hear from their mouths. I like this conditioning concept, but I would dare to say, as it comes in family or domestic disputes, we're not going to have the pleasure of conditioning in conflict before we go into this mediation. When I go into mediation, I tell them right off the bat what my expectations of how things are going to go. If it doesn't go this way, I'm going to end it. And, I'm first off going to guarantee that it's safe for all of us. And if I can't do that, it's just not going to be a thing that's going to go on. There's a lot of complexities that go into this concept that you're asking about or bringing up. And I appreciate it, but I wonder, how in the court, when we see cases that are judge-ordered mediations, and these people are in conflicts because they don't know how to deal with their own communication skills, or they don't have any communication skills, or maybe they have a lot, but more ego. They get tripped up with lofty ideas, and they can't get past that to function in the other level. And life experiential learning and EI is a piece of this. And it does start back, I think, in our teacher. I brought up some stuff with the teacher concept of learning how to deal with people in trauma and conflict. These students, they're hungry or they're had a traumatic event. Personally, I've used it in the hospital setting when I'd be making a presentation to HR, trying to litigate with legal teams there, and trying to help them understand that your employees, you don't know what they've been through before they came to work today, and you have no idea what they're about to face when they leave today. And if this is inclusive to rearing children or taking care of elderly parents or sick mate or them themselves being ill, the complexities are intense. And so the compassion, it all goes back to empathy skills. And if we can start that at an earlier age, then we don't have to do this mitigating before they go into the conflict in the situation room with mediation. Maybe we could encourage society to say, let's grasp hold of this option to learn what empathy is now before we see them, just end up in riots and murdering because they want instant gratification for a behavior they don't really understand. It's intense. We could look at a lot of different things here, but I appreciate you brought that up. But what would that look like? In domestic disputes, we find that, or parenting plans, actually, in the Tennessee courts, they say you go to a parenting class, but that parenting class comes after the mediation and after the courts, and not before. And that it really should be opposite. How we make that work? Oh, we lost her.
No, she's there. I think she had to take a call, so I think she's.
Oh, okay. But that's where I'm thinking about that.
But but Mandy was saying something and she disappeared for some time and then she came back. Mandy, what about me? I don't wear glasses. Now, what is the thing? I'm not being able to see things from another lens.
You are a mediator with the ability to see, but not the ability to have empathy for the ones that wear glasses.
Yes, that's true. Because 20/20 is not always a bit obtained. They have this thing called legally blind. You can still see something, but you're legally blind. And I think that this applies Vikram, if you don't wear glasses, you're in the minority. There are many of us that do. I have one of 4 children that doesn't have to wear glasses. 1 of 4. One of them wants to wear glasses, doesn't need the glasses. Then I've got one that has to wear glasses, can't wear contacts. Then I have one that wants to only wear contacts and never wear glasses. So all kids, they're all my children. I am their mother, but their perspective on their vision choices are all different and their needs are different. It's all right. You can share your glasses. Readers are the ones that are most common on the shelves that you can go pick up another pair and be able to change them out because you're on a lower level and reading close up is what the assistance you need to read, right? So that's where I understand it. That Vikram, you don't need them, but the understanding it's a really neat story, right?
That's the advantage you get when you don't read books.
He doesn't read books. That's
exactly.
The reason.
That's what I was going to say.
That's the reason. But you're going to have a problem with your ears.
That's why I need these.
Because you have Ken to talk to you about the books instead of buying his books. So your ears will have damage from hearing all the time.
It's not just only Ken's book. Imagine we've got the essence of all the books that you see behind him. That's what we get when we talk to him. So look how many books we don't have to read because we can listen to him. And ears, look, we've got this. We'll hear.
I love that. That's great. I love it.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Mandy, is there anything else that you want to comment on? Because Eileen, I don't know if I'm sure she'll come back.
Because I had with this conversation with the eyes, I had many images. The last image I had was that Themis, the goddess of justice. Themis. She is a Greek ancient god of Olympus. It is the 12 main gods, Zeus and Hera, you know them? Have you heard about?
I've studied Greek mythology. I've studied a little.
Yeah, so I know it. Okay, that was the perfect answer. So you know very well. So the symposium, one of the symposiums will be near Delphi, maybe the Oracle. Or
well, that would be wonderful.
Wouldn't it be? And in Zakynthos also, you're welcome. So I was saying that I was thinking of Themis, who keeps the Libra and knife, kind of.
Sword, yeah.
Yeah. And she's wearing a piece of...
she's blindfolded. She's blindfolded. Yeah.
Yes. They say that the reason she does that is to be neutral. I believe, except of neutrality, she wears that to have more empathy. Because when you don't use the eyes, which are the tools we have to see the very obvious things. We find other ways to feel and understand the other senses. So if you don't see the obvious things through the eyes, you can use all the other signs and have another perspective and point of view, not the I view.
But Mandy, let me tell you that what you're saying is a theoretical thing. Practically, you don't follow it. Right now, on a phone call, she tells me, I don't understand what you say up till I don't see you, your lips moving up till then I don't understand what you say. Where is the concept of blindfold then?
Yes, but this is something completely different, because if you speak the how is your language? Hiki.
No, Mandy, forget
What
that.
is
It's the
Indian
ears.
language?
You have to use the other senses. You have to get your ears tuned to that. That is what you need to do.
Yes, because if we talk for a long time, I will use my senses to realize what you are saying. The eyes is the easy way, but when you use the difficult way, which are the other senses, then you have a deeper
But Mandy,
way to see things.
And you have to tune yourself immediately, because if you're looking at maybe resolving disputes globally, there will be things you'll have to pick up right there. You will not get the opportunity to say, okay, let me take some time to understand this accent and then I'll come back to you. It has to be. So you have to tune your ears. So now you have to get headphones, wear headphones and tune yourself. But let me tell Eileen that Elizabeth thanks you for your answer. She said, thank you. Thanks, Eileen. Great answer too. Acknowledgement and respect are essential in the mediation process. Good point about vulnerability also.
At the symposium, we can make the experiment and close our eyes and try to contact. We have to do these kind of experiments and exercises so we can work on our empathy and our alternative ways of understanding, not only the obvious. It would be very nice.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone will put their cameras off and they will speak, and hopefully you'll understand them. You'll tune your ears. So Melanie, well, Melanie, you want to say something?
No,
I was asking Eileen because she went away. She went away and she came back, and I don't know where. Yes, Eileen, you wanted to say something?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. Perfect. So thank you, Melanie, for your insightful session, and of course, please, all of you, come for the last session with Ken Cloke. With him, obviously, it's always a pleasure listening to him, his words of wisdom. So, and any other inputs that you have after listening to all the other sessions, you can do that, because I'm going to start the learnings and key takeaways session just before Ken's session. So please bring your thoughts from the other sessions. So thank you very much.
Well, every one of you, thank you for having me and listening and making these conversations. And again, thank you for Vikram for organizing this for us. And I appreciate all the input. It was wonderful. I appreciate all the dialogue.
Thank you. And let me just cut the live stream.